Listen Layer allows you to collect chat activity from across your website and use that to power your conversion tracking and data collection. Today, I'm going to show you how easy and powerful this is. The first step inside of your Listen Layer account is to ensure that your website domain is properly defined and that you've placed your tracking script on your website. In this case, we've used Google Tag Manager to place the main Listen Layer script as a custom HTML tag firing on all pages. Jumping back to Listen Layer, we're going to search for our chat tool. In this case, HubSpot Chat. And we're going to make sure that that listener is turned on. Now, once it's turned on, you'll want to navigate to the features section, filter to the activity filter, and turn on some of the activity events. Now, most chat tools have some form of conversion tracking built in, but most oftentimes it's very limited. For example, they might automatically send some events, but only send those to a platform like Google Analytics. And they might limit those events to only fire, for example, when a chat starts. Most marketers use multiple marketing platforms such as Google Ads, Facebook Ads, LinkedIn, and so on. What if you wanted to collect more activity from your chats and push them across all of these multiple platforms? For example, perhaps we only want to send a conversion when the user is requesting a sales chat as opposed to a support chat. Or maybe we want to wait until the user has sent a total of 4 messages. All of these are easily accomplished inside of Listen Layer. Now, we're going to drill into the HubSpot Chat Listener, which has these available for features. Other chat listeners may vary slightly from this, but the overall setup is generally the same. So as you dig into your chat tool and your chat listener, make sure that you're thoroughly testing your setup and learning specifically how that works. In this case, each of these activity features is going to generate a specific event into the data layer automatically when the activity occurs. So when a user begins a chat, this event, HS chat started, will be sent into the data layer. If a user then drops their email into the chat, this event will be sent into the data layer. The data layer is an object in the user's browser that can be captured using Google Tag Manager. You can very simply create triggers and tags, capture variables, and you can use those to power your tracking across multiple marketing platforms with a simple framework. So once we have our features turned on, you'll notice that in our event settings screen, all of these individual events are also turned on. And it's important to make sure that you publish your changes in Listen Layer. In this case, everything is already live and there's no need to publish. So let's jump to an actual demo website. And we're going to refresh our preview. And we'll notice that we have a HubSpot chat down here in the corner. Before we go ahead and interact with that, we're going to take a look at the console. Now, Listen Layer pushes data into the data layer. And we also make that easily viewable inside of the console as objects. You can also see every time a data layer push occurs that we will push an actual, that Google Tag Manager will read the data layer and it will generate what's called a message inside of Google Tag Manager. So let's begin a chat. Just said hello in the chat. And we're going to scroll down in the console. It looks like we're getting some information back from HubSpot. So we'll just jump over to the Tag Manager debug view where it's oftentimes easier to see this. And you can see we have an HS chat started message because this is the first time the user has started a chat. And this has been pushed into the data layer by Listen Layer. And Google Tag Manager is now reading this and making it available as a message here. So we can write triggers based on this to track conversion activity, for example. You'll also note, because the user was the one who initiated the chat, that we have collected and pushed that information into the data layer. You can see this is the first message from this particular user. Now, again, depending on the chat tool that you're using, this data layer structure may appear slightly different. For example, if you have a form at the beginning of your chat, some tools will allow us to actually collect that form information. And so you can easily differentiate between a chat where the user maybe selected sales versus support. Those can be captured as variables inside of Google Tag Manager. So let's jump into Google Tag Manager, and we're going to fire a simple conversion based on chat started. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy the name of this event, and I'm going to create a trigger. And this is going to be called a custom event trigger. And we're going to paste the name of the event, HS chat started. And we can just call this chat started. Or you could always just paste the event name in here again. And then I actually want to know how often, or I want to measure how many messages a user sends in. So I want to get this message from user account variable. And once we go back to our console, we can actually see this event here. You have to filter through some of your other messages if there are some. And we want to get this value. So we're going to right click on that and copy the property path. And we're going to set this one up as a data layer variable, because Google Tag Manager is going to be getting this variable from the data layer as events occur. We're going to call this message count from user. And then again, we're going to jump back and we're going to create a trigger, but in this case, we're going to create it based on the actual message from the user. So again, it's going to be a custom event. And what we want this to be considered is a high quality chat. Now, there are multiple ways to do this. In fact, we can write even more powerful rules inside of Listen Layer itself, and we can push custom values into the data layer, which becomes, almost endlessly powerful as far as how you can enhance your web tracking. In this case, we're going to have a pretty basic setup, and we want to call it a high quality chat when the user actually reaches a certain threshold. So when the message count from user equals, let's just call it 3, then we're going to trigger this thing called a high quality chat. So now we have 2 triggers and 1 variable that we have captured from our data layer. Very simple setup. Let's go ahead and create some events. We're going to use the GA4 event tag. Now, keep in mind that based on those triggers, you could send data to all of your marketing data platforms. In this case, we're just going to simply focus on one, which is a GA4 tag. In this case, we don't have our actual measurement ID, so I'm just going to put in a placeholder. But of course, you would want to put in your actual measurement ID there. And I'm going to send an event called chat activity. And chat action can be a parameter. And we could populate this with a number of things. In this case, I'm just going to call it chat started. Now, of course, we can simply call this event name chat started if we want to keep it even more simple instead of using event parameters. But if we wanted to collect multiple activity elements within a single event, we could do that here, and then we could write rules inside of GA4 to determine which of those are going to be turned into conversions. So we're just going to call this chat activity, or let's just call it chat started, just for simplicity. And we'll get rid of that. And we're going to fire this when that chat started event occurs. And then we're going to create a second event, and we're going to call it a quality chat. And this time, we're going to fire this only when that message count equals 3. And we're going to save that information. And let's go ahead and update our preview and take a look at this on our website. So we're still in our same chat session. And interestingly enough, our chat has asked us for an email address. Now, many chat tools have this feature where it'll ask the user for their email address. And inside of ListenLayer, we have the ability to track when a user enters their email. However, each of the chat tools is slightly different. For example, HubSpot has a concept that I believe they call known user. And if the user on your website has already filled out a form, then if they fill this out inside of the chat, we actually don't receive the information back from them in order to trigger an event that the user entered their email. Essentially, you'd only be tracking net new email entrances inside of the chat. Other tools like Drift don't necessarily do that. And still others even can have a challenge, like within HubSpot Forms, where they'll sometimes reject test email addresses, and those also might not track. So let's go ahead and test this. I know that was somewhat of a test email address. You can see we did get an event here called HS Chat user entered email. And so if you wanted to, you could actually fire an additional event into GA4 based on this specific event. But in this case, we're just going to focus on the tags that we already created. As a user, I'm going to enter another message. And we're going to take a look, and we're going to see we're now at a total message count of 2. And we're going to say still another message. So in this case, now we have met our threshold of 3. So let's just see if we happen to write our rule correctly. And it looks like we did. You'll notice that on this message from user, we have no tags being fired. And on this message from user, we have a high quality chat that is now being fired. And the values that are being sent in to GA4 are shown here with the name of the event and everything that we defined inside of Google Tag Manager. Now, because we had already begun a chat, HubSpot chat, it's difficult to start a new chat session in HubSpot. Even if I were to come back to this website, a week or 2 from now and started a new chat, it would essentially carry forward this chat session, and it's not going to track that as a new event. And so specifically when it comes to HubSpot Forms, the chat started and the user enters email features can be a little bit more difficult to test because of how their chat sessions carry forward, as well as how they understand and use the concept of a known user. However, understand that as a result of that, if you use this event and this event inside of your website tracking, it's going to limit those events and conversions only to real, true first-time chats and real, true net new email addresses as close as possible. One thing that we didn't touch on here is the ability to track when an actual agent responds. So let's go ahead and send a response. You can see that we got a response from our agent. And here we can see another event has been pushed into the data layer and now is available inside of Google Tag Manager. Now, again, some tools allow us to actually capture more information, such as the actual data or the actual text that the agent or the user entered into the chat. In this case, HubSpot does not allow that. But in other listeners and other tools that do allow us to do that, you could write rules inside of Listen Layer using the custom data layer values feature. And you can actually target specific key words and phrases inside of the chat conversation and push custom information into the data layer based on that. For example, if you had an automated chatbot response and the user selected an option from that response, you can, in certain situations, capture that and use it in your tracking to segment your data or to push information in that would indicate quality. So dig into the custom data layer values feature because it is extremely powerful. This was just a quick high-level implementation of chat tracking. Of course, there's a ton of things you can do. And once you get your basics set up, that should free up some time to dig in and start to learn more about customization.